Do you know, the years have actually been kind to David Lawler. He doesn't look a million miles, okay, a little bit older, but than what he went into jail. And so long ago.
So long ago. Like, it'd be nearly, the murder he was convicted for would have been 30 years, will be 30 years in December. So nearly 30 years.
Would I say he looks a bit better? Food is obviously good.
Yeah. I guess, like, I suppose, you know, obviously, like, did a horrific crime, so we don't know what way he thinks. But I suppose if you're in prison and you know you're in there, and you probably, you know, you get into the rhythm of going to the gym and eating certain amounts of food.
Certainly, maybe just keeping yourself clean and stuff, because Lawler had this reputation actually at the time he was arrested and everything, of being this sort of loner who didn't properly wash. He'd long hair, dirty hair, and he was a bit of a, you know, he was somebody that you'd sort of avoid, really. Now, he's an interesting character, and maybe we should just go back first of all and describe the victim, who is Marilyn Rynn. A name which is still kind of, I think, recognisable nowadays. She was a civil servant.
Yes.
She was living out around the Blanchardstown area somewhere. And she had gone to her office Christmas party in town on the night of the 22nd of December, 95. From my recall, she'd gone for food on O'Connell Street afterwards, as many people do. It was just a typical kind of a late night out in town.
Of course.
And she'd got what was known as the Nightlink bus in those days back to Blanchardstown. And had never basically, she was reported missing some days later, was it?
Yeah, because this was, as you said, the 22nd of December, and she didn't turn up for Christmas Day. She was due to go to her parents for Christmas Day dinner, so her brother reported her missing, and she wasn't actually found until the 7th of January, so you can only imagine that Christmas for the family. And obviously the conditions, it was winter, it was very cold conditions, so she was found by a cadaver dog. Actually, we were only talking recently about the benefits of a cadaver dog in Tulka Valley Park, which is Finglas, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah.
She was found on the 7th of January. So she'd been missing for a couple of weeks. But the guards, I think, even though CCTV wouldn't been as prolific as it is now, they were able to piece together her night and saw that she'd left Eddie Rockets and got the bus and then hadn't been seen since then. So she was walking through the park when she was attacked by David Lawler and raped and murdered, and he left her body was unclothed. He left her clothes piled beside her body and went about was partying over Christmas. His wife actually got pregnant during this time.
Obviously, he was married, was he?
Yeah, he was married, yeah. And obviously she had no idea of what he'd done, but, you know, he continued on with his life. And there was actually, funny enough, when they did catch up with him, there was a Google search on his computer where he had basically looked up DNA, would DNA survive in the elements, and he was under the wrong impression that it wouldn't. So then, you know, they were going around doing blood samples and stuff. I think they took over 350 blood samples of people, and he volunteered to this, but they just got lucky because it was so cold that the DNA, so his semen was found on the body and it was preserved because of the cold. So I think it was actually the first case of DNA profiling used in a rape and murder.
It was,
yeah.
And you know, it's the case that was brought up at the Forensic Science Ireland conference recently, because that's exactly what it was, and I suppose how things had developed. The DNA usually wouldn't, I think, not survive because it's not a living thing, but, you know, be there.
Yeah.
When or be as easy to attain a profile of when there's normal conditions and when a body is decomposed, etc. But because of the freezing temperatures, and the idea that he had Googled it as well, you know, that 95, that was the early days of Googling, actually.
Yeah.
So, you know, he had that sort of, that would have been almost seen as being a skill set then in 95.
Yeah.
Being able to go on and research and Google and whatever.
And having the resources
It was interesting because Marilyn Rynn was a very loved family person. She was not married as far as I can recall and didn't have her own children, but she had a really close relationship with her larger family and her nieces and nephews and siblings and all the rest of it. And they were a real family. But it always struck me at that time of year, everyone's busy, aren't they? Between the 22nd and particularly in the 25th of December.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't see people and you're not in touch over those few days because somebody's going shopping or they're going to parties or they're having gatherings or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
And it was literally when she didn't show up and then everybody started putting their heads together. And well, when did you speak to Marilyn last? When knew she was going to that?
Yeah.
And she had been on the bus as well was the other thing. And do you know, like these sliding doors moments in life, if you could have just changed one thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think the way she walked home was a shortcut that she'd usually have taken during the day. And there was this bus, the Nightlink, would go a kind of a longer way around, but she was tired.
Yeah.
And she'd waited for this bus in town and I think she just wanted to get to her bed.
Yeah, it was 3 a.m. Yeah.
3 on her feet all night.
Yeah.
And then you've had a few drinks and then you've something to eat and all you want to do is go to bed.
Yeah.
So she opted to take this shortcut.
Yeah. It's that horrific thing.
Can you remember, was he on the bus with her or was he lurking about the Tolka Park?
I don't think he was on the bus with her, but he had been at a Christmas party himself.
And drinking.
He'd been actually drinking from the day before, I think. So he was highly intoxicated. And he obviously, I think he living in the Blanchardstown area. So we assumed that maybe he just spotted her and he attacked her. But yeah, he'd been out himself and obviously maybe just looking for somebody. He did have a clean record, but I suppose his cousin, who's also very notorious, had also a clean record
for
before.
Sure, and there's a couple of connections there that you've mentioned that have triggered my memories when you say about him having a wife, and I was surprised. I do know that actually because I had done a story in many years ago that I think the wife had kind of denounced him at some point and had not sort of stood by him after this horrific crime and all the rest of it. But we discovered then that she was visiting him in prison and that there had been arrangements made for the two of them to meet up outside the prison when he was getting some temporary release. So she was actually supporting them. And we'd also heard that he was going back to the family home once he was released. I don't know what the situation is like now. Yeah. I could be talking to you about something that was in place about 8 or 10 years ago. So yes, I do now remember he had a wife. But interesting that you should say he went out and committed this horrific crime while he was, putting himself out there as a family man. His wife was pregnant because exactly the same thing happened in the Larry Murphy household. And that's the weird thing. Larry Murphy and himself are cousins. They're both originally from Bolton Class. First cousins, yeah. Yeah. And they both commit horrific crimes against women.
Yeah.
Larry Murphy, of course, while he is sort of, dubbed or seen as being Ireland's suspected serial killer, he's actually only been convicted of one crime and it wasn't murder, but it was attempted murder. Yeah. He only didn't really murder that woman because 2 hunters stumbled upon him. He had her up in the mountains in a very lonely forest area and was trying to suffocate her. So, it's just 1 millimeter away from murder. Yeah. He just didn't finish off what he had started. But
and it goes back to what you were saying. If Marilyn hadn't have walked through the park and if, those men hadn't come along, it is one of those just really, like for this woman, very fortunate, for Marilyn, unfortunate.
Exactly.
Just those things.
Those things, exactly.
Yeah.
And so Larry Murphy obviously was a carpenter, nobody. I don't think David Lawler was known before he was caught because of the DNA. Murphy would have, and I'm trying to think what year Murphy was found. So there was
2001, wasn't it?
2001.
Yeah.
Because Operation Trace at that point was in existence. It was looking to link cases of missing women, unsolved disappearances of women. The Annie McCarrick case, they were looking at the Jojo Dullard case, the Deirdre Jacob case. Yeah. And the Garda Commissioner had established Operation Trace in order to examine if there is a serial killer at all in the country, operating in the country. Yeah. And while they are going through files and investigating, a guy called Larry Murphy is caught in the act of having kidnapped, abducted, brutally raped a woman in numerous places and is caught in the act of trying to kill her. Yeah. So he becomes a really big person of interest for Operation Trace.
Yeah, because it was actually, he was convicted in 2001, but he was jailed in 2001. It was 2000 that he committed this.
That he committed that. So 5 years after.
5 years. But I suppose, as you said, those women all went missing in the mid to late 90s. And the one that he's still linked with, the others have kind of been ruled out that they have other suspects in mind now. But Deirdre Jacob, who went missing very near her home in Newbridge, County Kildare, she went missing in 1998. So I suppose it's only 2 years before he raped this woman. So he was very much a centre point of the Operation Trace. And there was a file sent to the DPP on Deirdre Jacob, but they ruled that there wasn't enough evidence to charge Larry Murphy.
Because there's no body, largely, and no crime scene, because she was last seen outside her family home standing on the pavement, and literally she was there 1 minute, gone the next. Disappeared into thin air.
Yeah.
He would later, according to a cellmate, admit that he abducted, and he told a story, according to the cellmate, that he had driven her. He had intended raping and killing her, but she had sort of put up such a struggle that he killed her almost by accident. The cellmate claims, has told police, and that he dumped her, according to the cellmate, in waters up around Blessington. Yeah. Now, that's as far as that story ever went. The cellmate, of course, was in prison, serving a sentence for a serious crime. So, But anyway, Larry Murphy is caught in, and is convicted in 2001. His first cousin, is already in prison. For this other horrific crime.
Yeah, exactly. So it took us several months, obviously, for the DNA, because it was the first time to do. I think they said it was there's been programs where the forensic experts have, and the Gardaí, I think Alan Bailey took part in it, where they've gone through how they found, how they were managed to match the profile. But I think it was August, it was the summer of 1996 by the time they could confirm his sample as being the correct DNA. So then when he went to trial, then he pleaded guilty. So he's been in prison since around, I think it was 1998, but I think he might have been in prison since then. So basically nearly 30 years. So he would have been in there when Larry was jailed, and they were in the same prison.
They were in Arbor Hill, and they were friends.
Yeah. And actually, funny you talk about the prisoner who came forward with the claims about Larry Murphy, because I was reading up earlier, and their colleagues in The Independent have reported about how one prisoner claimed to have heard, I think, in a yard, Larry and David Lawler and another guy were sitting around, and apparently the conversation was about how to bury women in the Dublin Mountains. That's what the prisoner claimed, and that David Lawler was involved in that conversation as well.
So there was 3 friends in Arbor Hill around that time, and Larry Murphy wasn't a mixer, and nor was David Lawler. They described the two of them as kind of loners. They were able to kind of deal with their own company, but they did come together as first cousins and friends, odd ones. The third, I'm going to hope you remember his name. I think he was released recently, or certainly was going to be.
Frank McCann.
Frank McCann.
Yeah.
Who had basically set fire to his own property and killed his wife and their child in the fire.
Yeah.
Really sinister character, and had done it all to cover up a inappropriate relationship he was having with a young swimmer.
Yeah, because he was a swim coach, and he would have been in the circles of George Gibney and the other really
Derry O'Rourke.
Yeah, and obviously the George Gibney podcast was they were all mentioned on that. So yeah, so they would have been in the same circles, and obviously we all know about what those people did. But yeah, Frank McCann, it was Brett Farnham, I think, wasn't it?
Was he released recently?
He was released, yeah. He's been on day release for a good number of years, because Conor Feehan in the Old Herald days has had doorstopped him a few times, and now I think he's fully released. And the I believe that the sister of his wife has spoken about the upset of him getting out. But yeah, he has been released.
And Lawler, the reason we're talking about him, of course, is because he's taking his first steps towards freedom. He'll be the third of the gruesome threesome, really, that hung around in Arbor Hill to be released. So what happens is, before they're released fully, they start getting these sort of temporary days where they are allowed out, but they're expected to come back.
Yes. So he has had his first unaccompanied day. So he basically was allowed out for the day and, as you said, has to come back. So this happened last week in Dublin City Centre. So Patrick O'Connell for the Sunday World found this out and went with a photographer. And as you said, we can see the photographs of him on SundayWorld.com, and approached David Lawler and asked him if he had any comment to make, about, did he have anything to say to Marilyn Rynn's family? And he just sort of stayed silent throughout. He was also asked about, because at the time there was a suspect in custody arrested on suspicion of the murder of Annie McCarrick, another missing woman, and there had been a link. There was a person in common between Annie and Marilyn Rynn, and that was kind of looked at the time and then ruled out. So he did ask, and obviously we know the connection to Larry Murphy and Annie McCarrick, even though that's also been ruled out since. But he was asked, did he have anything to say about that investigation, and stay quiet as well.
And who's he with? Is he with another prisoner?
I don't think
photographs of him there that we can just see. We have somebody else's face blurred out. Maybe that was just somebody walking along beside him.
I think it might have been, yeah. So he was out and just kind of, I suppose, he was at a store, like a shop in Dublin City Centre when we seen him, and he's out, he's attending a course in the capital, as prisoners usually do. So I suppose like it is nearly 30 years that he's been in prison, and we've previously talked about how maybe it's usually an average of 18 to 20 years that you get for life in Ireland isn't actually life. After 12 years, you're eligible to apply for parole, which is very rare. But it used to be 7 years, and families of victims quite rightly fought against that, and now it's 12. But the average, I think, is between 18 and 20. So he's been in for a long time, given what he did, obviously. And, there's only a few really that have been in over 30 years. I think, John Shaw, he was one of the serial killers who killed 2 women back in the 70s. He's still in prison. But
he's the longest.
He's the longest,
it's interesting because when Larry Murphy got out of prison and he was, he initially moved to Amsterdam or to the UK or something. But anyway, he ends up in Amsterdam at one stage, living there, and he hooks up with somebody he'd met in prison. Of course, you're that long in prison, the only friends you have left in life are probably from prison. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see if Lawler hooks up with McCann, or if they're two of them are, not the types, no matter, look, they've served their time and all the rest of it, but their motivation is different. A lot of the stories I would deal with are the gangland killers and all the rest of it. Their motivations are, you won't accept them as somebody who lives by a moral code, but you can understand them because they're motivated by greed, by money, or by, a row or something like that. They kill for those reasons. Yeah. These guys killing women randomly for pleasure. Yeah. Certainly with Lawler. They're really deeply sinister characters that are difficult to try and read or understand, or wonder how they would get on the outside, or how they would cope with normal society. Yeah, and the fact that, both these occasions they had, Larry Murphy and David Lawler had no previous, which is also scary. And, he was just out after a night out, as was Marilyn Rynn, and he just decided he was going to do this. So, it's just, you would have no forewarning as a woman, like with gangsters, you do sort of, of these people and of their reputations. And as you said, they're motivated by other things, isn't necessarily right. But in this occasion, they're just, you can just be so unlucky to meet evil, as Marilyn Rynn was. And, she... it's the ultimate scare story for women, isn't it? Exactly. You're walking home at night and a guy jumps out from behind a bush and you're raped and murdered. That's of course. And it is such a rare thing to happen, It's such a rare thing to happen. And, obviously the massive, we were talking about the Puska case this week with Niall, and, obviously the massive public outcry after the murder of Ashley Murphy. He was out for a walk. That was daylight. But, this was in 1995 and it's still happening to women. And luckily it is rare for these random attacks, but, it is your worst nightmare. The whole, don't walk home alone, ring me, all of this kind of thing. And, she was just, as you said, took a shortcut and she paid with her life. And this person, he's only 60. Yeah, and, he's young, in this day and age, that's young, and he's out now. And, he's not fully released, but he's getting days out. And there. We'll watch this space, and his photograph, if you want to see what he looks like now, just in case you should bump into him, is on the SundayWorld.com website. Yes. All right. Thanks, Eimear. Thanks, Nicola. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.